Xenia was busy in the kitchen assisting the chef, Mrs. Golan, when one of the young maidens, Aliana, walked up to her. "Xenia, the queen would like to see you." Xenia looked at Mrs. Golan, who was also looking at her. "Did she say what she needs me for?" "I didn't ask." The young maiden answered, "All right, thanks." She watched the young maiden leave before turning to face Mrs. Golan. "Tell me I'm not in trouble," she pleaded, holding the old lady by the hem of her dress. "You should have been more careful while dealing with those loud mouths." The old lady said her words were a little slow and soft, but each word could be heard. Xenia left her dress and looked at Mrs. Golan. "Do you think they reported me to the queen?" she asked. "How am I supposed to know that?" "Did I tell you the queen and I had any discussion?" She turned to look at Xenia, who was restless. "Just go listen to what she has to say. Who knows? Might not be what you are thinking." Xenia got the courage to move, but then she wasn't sure. "Are you sure should just get going already?" Mrs. Golan pushed her a little. Despite her old age, Mrs. Golan was still agile and very sweet. She sees Xenia as a granddaughter and loves her very much. Whenever Xenia needed advice on matters she couldn't handle or understand, Mrs. Golan was her mentor, and she got most of her attitude from being under her for years. "Send someone to check up on me if I am not back in the next 30 minutes, Xenia whispered to her before leaving to meet the queen. She got to the queen's bedroom, and her heart felt like it was about to jump out of her chest. She held her beating heart and exhaled deeply before knocking on the door. "Come in." Her tender voice made Xenia feel more relaxed. Maybe Mrs. Golan was right. She was overthinking. She found the courage to open the door, and when she entered she saw that the queen was tending to King Gardiel's skin. "Your Majesties." She bowed her head. "Xenia, just the maiden I was looking for." The queen smiled. "Can you tend to those flowers for me?" The queen pointed to the vase of rose flowers that were dying. Xenia was shocked at the sight. The queen noticed her shocked reaction and said, "I've been busy attending to the king that forgot about the flowers." She laughed. "Can you get fresh ones from the garden?" Xenia nodded. "At your service, your Majesty." The queen gestured for her to leave, which she did. Xenia ran down to hug Mrs. Golan. "Elsie, everything went well," Mrs. Golan said. "How did you know it was me?" "Who would dare to hug me?" Mrs. Golan asked, and Xenia smiled. "So I see your head hasn't been cut off yet, and I haven't received news about your banishment." "Mrs. Golan, do you have to be this sarcastic?" Mrs. Golan laughed. "I have to go pick flowers for Her Majesty. I will be right back." Lucas was tending to the flowers in the garden when he noticed a movement in the flowers. "What are you? Human or animal?" he asked. Coming closer to the area, he noticed some movements, but before he could get any closer, Xenia came out. "Xenia," Lucas called, looking very shocked. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Hi, Lucas. I wasn't expecting you either." Xenia had no idea that he knew her name or that he'd be here. She has never been this close to him, and now that she is, she must admit that he's as handsome as they said he was. His prominent shoulders, his height, his eyes, his lips, and his smell. How was she going to erase such memory from her mind? And why does he smell so good? Is this because he tends to the flowers? Could he be getting this smell from the fragrance of the knowers? Lucas smiled when he noticed she was checking him out. "Why were you hiding?" "Ugh." Xenia coughed, trying not to make it more embarrassing than it already is. "Elle asked why you were hiding. You were so handsome that I just had to look away." She covered her mouth after realizing what she had just said. "I, didn't mean." "You didn't mean it?" Lucas asked while folding his arms. "Does that mean I am not handsome? Is that what she meant?" Xenia asked herself. "Didn't mean it that way? Then you are saying Elle am handsome." Xenia was confused. It was obvious Lucas was playing with her mind, and when he noticed the look on her face, he smiled. I was just pulling your legs, but everyone deserves a compliment once a while, and you shouldn't take back such words. Xenia nodded. I am sorry. No need to be. What brought you here? I came to get some flowers for the queen. Roses? Lucas asked. How did he know that? Xenia thought. Roses are the queen's favorite flower. Do you know why? Xenia shook her head. Do you want to know why? She nodded. Lucas plucked out a rose and gave it to her. Do you know roses aren't just red? There are different colors, Xenia asked, surprised. Yeah, roses are considered a timeless gift of love. They make special occasions memorable with their presence and their lingering fragrance. Roses are considered one of the best gifting options for expressing love, admiration, joy, and other innate human emotions. They are one of the oldest flowers on earth, and they are edible. He smiled. The queen loves roses because the king won her heart. With that, through a flower? It was her favorite flower, and he guessed it right. She keeps it with her to remind her how much she loves him, even though he's not the same man she dated years ago. Wouldn't it hurt more keeping such close to her? It makes her stronger. It keeps her attached to him because it's a memory of their love. After plucking the roses, he handed her the banquet of the rose flowers. What flower do you like? Lucas asked. Lotus flower. That's an interesting flower. Did you know that the lotus flower commonly serves as a sacred for purity, rebirth, and strength? Really? Lucas nodded. Why? Because they rise from the mud without stains. Wow. Xenia almost forgot she was sent by the queen, and she'd be expecting her by now. Lucas noticed she was restless, so he said, Guess you have to leave now. I hate to leave, but I have to. That's fine. I will see you around. He stretched his hand out for a handshake. Xenia hesitated for a while before shaking his hand. See you around, Lucas. She smiled before walking away. She was on her way to the palace when she met Chloe, Eve, and Aliana. Chloe looked at Xenia from head to toe, and she could tell something was different. Who has beer making you smile? Xenia decided to ignore her, but Chloe stopped right in front of her. I'm talking to you, and what were you doing with Lucas? Xenia wasn't surprised. They were jobless, and all they know how to do is gossip. If they knew she was talking to Lucas, then it's obvious they were spying on her, but she wasn't going to let that break her. And since when did I start reporting my duties to you? Don't play smart with me, Xenia. I didn't ask you to be blockheaded. Chloe was about to slap Xenia, but Xenia held her hand before she could even touch her. Lay your hand on me and get ready to meet yourself in hell, Chloe, and I can assure you it won't be a pretty place. She threw her hand to her side and walked away from them. Aliana smiled before running to meet Xenia, while Eve tried to calm Chloe down. It's obvious Xenia is having an upper hand on Lucas. I'd act fast if I were you. Chloe pushed Eve's hand away from her shoulder while she went to meet Lucas.